India, I learned, is a case in point. In irrigated areas, less than 30% of the population lives in poverty. But here in non-irrigated areas, 70% of these children grow up in poverty. Water and water scarcity, poverty and famine go hand in hand. In the developing world, as elsewhere, populations settle around water. Why? To transport people, product, and waste. It was shocking to me that 70% of the industrial waste and 90% of the human waste in the developing world is discharged directly into surface waters. That was an eye-opener. But I learned as a doctor that people do what they have to do. And they'll bathe and cleanse themselves and their possessions in the shadow of sewage pipes if necessary. We shouldn't be surprised then if this Iraqi boy near Twyeth nuclear plant, regardless of the risk, has found his way to water, nor that his next stop is likely here. In impoverished and war-torn areas, especially those with a lack of water resources, water scarcity leads to famine, malnutrition, and dehydration. It also leads to malaria, TB, cholera, and other diseases, and it complicates the HIV/AIDS situation. Still, I must tell you that when I learned that half of the developing world hospital beds are occupied by victims of waterborne disease, I was shocked. The link between water and health is staggering. 20% of deaths worldwide in children under 5 from waterborne diseases. Now, where water is scarce, those who can adapt do adapt. For example, the average Maasai warrior is able to survive on 4.2 liters of water a day to cover all needs. This is in spite of the fact that the UN and the WHO declare that 20 liters are marginal to support family life, and 50 liters are required to properly manage the health and hygiene of a family. But in the developed world, we use 100 to 200 liters per day of water, subsidized and casually managed and often treated as an unlimited resource. It was disturbing to me to learn at the time I wrote this book that the average Los Angelean consumes a staggering 500 liters of water per day, enough to support 100 Maasai warriors. Survival in their world literally falls on the back of women who haul the water and manage its cooking, cleaning, caring for children and the elderly, and managing crops and livestock to boot. The hours they spend impact other opportunities like education and enterprise. And for their daughters, like these two from Nairobi, the future is a mirror of the past. They're stuck in a water trap. Absent these advantages, I marveled at how hard women work to bridge the gap on their own. The deck is so heavily stacked against them. Here's our planet at night. Consider for a moment what's lit up and what is not. And here is what this looks like in Zimbabwe on the ground. This is night, a battle for education and self-advancement. Who will win out? Little progress is made absent power. Think of what happens at night without access to electricity. Nothing. No studying, no small-scale productivity, no opportunity for people to improve their positions in the dark half of the day. Worldwide, 2 billion people have no domestic electricity. 1 billion more use batteries or candles combined. That's half of the world's population. And this leads to the burning of other fuels which pose environmental and health risks. I was surprised to learn how often water and energy cross paths. Hydropower is so remarkably prevalent. Some projects are huge ones, like this one in Yunnan province in China. But others are much more modest, like this water wheel driven by a stream operating a pump to irrigate a garden in the interior of Brazil. I learned with water, there's almost always a trade-off. Here, an energy source that's comparatively clean, local, and accessible, but also one that can displace populations and species and can contribute to water disasters, as we see here with the Dawal Dam in Pakistan. So, if we're uncomfortable with the choices above ground, well, we can always go below ground. and increasingly people are doing just that. Groundwater today accounts for 30% of the global freshwater supply and provides 50% of drinkable, 40% of industrial, and 20% of agricultural supply. And while it's relatively safe and secure compared to surface water, pollution of groundwater supplies is increasing and it's difficult to reverse. In most cases, when man and water collide, it's the water that suffers, whether it be from raw sewage and deoxygenated water responsible for fish kill here in Rio de Janeiro, or agricultural runoff associated with red tide, or bleached coral reefs in Belize as temperatures change, or this unusual contraption downriver in Brazil. It's a defoamer to dampen the floating foam clouds created by the direct discharge of chemical detergents and organic pollutants 50 miles upstream. So rather than fix the source of the problem, here we have a solution downriver. I did take the time to understand the link between carbonization, global warming, and our waters, but we don't have time for that today. We will just say that the numbers are the numbers and move on to the byproduct of global warming, water disasters with their floods, drought, and the remarkable destruction of human property and human life. What surprised me most about these disasters was how democratic they are. Every continent suffers. 665,000 deaths in water disasters between 1991 and 2000, and for so long, we here in the U.S. felt immune. An image like this drew dispassionate sympathy for those less fortunate in places far away. But as the camera rolls, the images draw closer and become more familiar until we find ourselves face to face with a new and stark reality, and it's this: that when confronted by an ever-changing hostile environment with aging or absent infrastructure, weak communications and warning systems, and the inability to move large populations through tiny bottlenecks to safe ground, disasters do happen. And it matters little whether it's a hurricane in New Orleans or a tsunami in Indonesia. Bad policy is simply bad policy. Now let us turn for a moment to human populations that place themselves voluntarily at risk. The world's population today is 6.3 billion people. 57% are rural, 43% urban, with our cities concentrated on the coastal plains. By 2030, there'll be about 8 billion of us, but now 63% will be in cities and 37% will be rural. Now, under ideal conditions, this urban migration could serve our human population well, with jobs, clean air and water, transportation, housing and education, healthcare, safety and security. But without proper investment, this is a death trap. Here are all the cities at the time I wrote this book that had populations that exceeded 1 million. 389 of them, beginning with Hong Kong, at 25 million citizens. Most are in coastal regions. Many lack adequate infrastructure to support their needy populations, which grow each and every day. As a result, we have crowding of these populations and inadequate infrastructure. Here's what that looks like. 1.1 million currently lack access to clean, safe water. Here's what that looks like. 25,000 die every day, mostly children, for lack of water and food. Here's what that looks like. 6,000 die each day from waterborne disease. Here's how they became infected. So, what I've learned and what I've been trying to share with doctors and nurses and hospitals who will listen is this.